I'm just delighted to be here today with my friend Terri Marcroft, who is a published author, and she's worked in Silicon Valley in the tech sector for many years as a chief marketing officer and a board member, and now she's working on her passion, which I'm going to let her tell you about. And Terri, it's nice to have you here on the Meaning Code.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm honored to join you.
This is going to be great fun. So, I mentioned that you're a published author. You have one book already that you wrote several years ago on marketing. What's the
Right,
name of that one?
right. That was The Path to Revenue, Secrets of Successful Tech Leaders. And I took the shutdown opportunity in 2020 when we
Oh,
were all quarantined that to finish up the book right then. And so it
uh-huh.
published in the end of 2020.
And that did pretty well, right? You got some top numbers on Amazon there for a while, I saw.
I was happy with it. Thank you. Yeah, I got pretty good reviews. And the idea was just to take what I had learned in 20 years of consulting, but really 30 years of Silicon Valley marketing, take what I had learned and wrap it up and make it kind of more succinct to offer my lessons learned as I wrapped up my career. And so I felt good about kind of leaving Silicon Valley and moving on to my passion by just summarizing those lessons learned over the various decades of technology marketing.
That's great. And then since you already had the experience of writing a book, you decided to write another book.
Right. Well, yeah, and this one has a long road to get to it as well. But this one now I consider to be even more exciting than technology marketing, actually, because it's very much reflective of my passion for open adoption. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this book.
Yeah, so do you want to show a picture of the cover of the book?
I could do that. I can share my screen with you. That's what it looks like. And the book is coming out next month. So it's called Pro Choice, Pro Adoption. It's time for a loving, positive response to unplanned pregnancy.
So it's a very intriguing title.
I think that's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so if you take us off screen share here now, so we can
Okay,
talk
sure.
to each other. So you said open adoption, and for
Uh-huh.
those who don't know what that is, maybe you could explain open adoption.
Okay, most people don't know what that is, and part of the reason for that, if you haven't been involved in an adoption specifically in your personal life, is that adoption has changed a lot. Because back in the days when you and I were in high school and college, Karen, back in those days, adoptions in general were closed, and it meant that the woman placed her baby for adoption, often against her will, back then, and then after the baby was placed in a new family, she was just told, the birth mother was just told, let's never talk about it, let's just forget it ever happened, and we're going to move on with our lives. And so fast forward a few decades, what we've learned is that all of that secrecy and all of that lack of information, lack of transparency was very hard on everybody involved, but most especially for the woman who gave birth. And so now today, by contrast, an open adoption means that she can not only choose the parents for her baby, but she can also stay in touch with the adoptive family. So that means everybody, if everybody wants to, they can stay in communication, and they can even become, a big extended blended family. So I've talked with, over the course of writing this book, it's been very exciting to talk with several different birth mothers or birth parents, a couple of birth fathers who have chosen adoption and then stayed in touch with the adoptive family. And they get together and they celebrate birthdays and they celebrate anniversaries and they have parties together, they have dinners together. And the birth parents then get to see that child thriving in the new adoptive family. So that's the beauty of open adoption.
Wow. And I'm guessing it's also better for the children if they know from the get-go what their life is rather than having it sprung on them in like when they're 8 years old by some kid in school that starts throwing epithets at them because we know that you don't really belong to those people.
Right, right. So it's especially better for the adoptee, as you mentioned, they avoid that huge and traumatic surprise of finding out later in life. Um, it actually is better for the child to let them know from the very beginning that they had been adopted, rather than keeping a secret and pretending like that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
So being honest about the adoption from the beginning is a really good idea. But then having the transparency and being able to stay in touch, stay in communication helps that child to get a lot of his or her questions answered. Because you know how curious kids are.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't get an answer to their question, often they think, oh, that's my fault. Then it's because of something that I said or did, a child will think. And that's not the case at all. So for
Right.
them to be able to know the truth and know what really happened is extremely, it's comforting for them. It satisfies their curiosity, and it's good news all the way around. So for the birth parents and for the adoptee, but it's also good for the adoptive parents because then they have access to a lot more information, like medical history and such.
Well, so you said that it's your passion, which means that somehow that this has been a part of your life for some time. And so one of the things we like to do on the Meaning Code is kind of learn the background of the people who are here. So I wonder if you might
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about your life, about growing up and becoming an adult, and how you got involved in this whole thing.
Well, so sure, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family of 7 kids. My parents worked very hard to raise us, and they were staunch Catholics, and so they raised us according to the Catholic doctrines. And but we in bottom line was we just had a big happy family. We had 6 girls and 1 boy, and so there was a lot of estrogen in our house. It was a ton of fun. And my sisters today are my closest friends. And so they're just a bunch of wonderful women. They say that all of us look alike, so you'd have a hard time distinguishing us from one to the next. But so by the time I got married, which was kind of late in life, I was in my mid 30s by the time I got married. My siblings had by then 14 children. And so there were a lot of second generation in our family. And so when my husband and I had trouble conceiving, that was just a big surprise. It was a big surprise and very unexpected that, I wouldn't be able to have kids. And so we worked on some infertility treatments and testing and all that for a couple of years. And then we turned to adoption. And when we were able to adopt, it was because a young woman who was in her senior year of high school chose adoption. And then after she chose adoption, she chose us to be her baby's parents. And so, being able to get to know her, she chose us about halfway through her pregnancy. I want to say that she was about 4.5 or so months through her pregnancy. So, getting connected with her right then in the middle was truly it was a huge blessing because we were able to get to know her and talk with her, feel comfortable with her. We met up with her weekly. I drove to her town at least once a week for the whole second half of her pregnancy, and she was very open with us. She let us know that she was sure about her plan, and she let us know that we were welcome to participate in any part of the pregnancy that we wanted to, which meant accompanying her to doctor's appointments sometimes, and going out to lunch with her. And my sisters shared some maternity clothes with her and that kind of thing. So there were just a lot of things about her pregnancy that was really beautiful because she allowed us to get close to her during that time. And anyway, so um, when she gave birth, then and her mom called us when she went into labor, and we were able to race back over to her town and be there for the delivery. And I'll tell you, Karen, that was just the most beautiful day to be able to see Sydney born, because I mean, number one, you don't normally have that vantage point, of course.
Yes.
But number two, just my husband was able to cut the cord. We were all able to just, laugh and cry and wonder at the awe of childbirth, and just to be there for it was an amazing gift. And so from then on, we have done our best to keep in touch with the birth mother, with Sydney's birth mother, and we've also done our best to be honest with Sydney about what the situation was and why her
Mm-hmm.
birth mother chose adoption.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, at one point, I think that was very telling was that when Sydney was when Sydney was in high school, she was 16 years old, and her birth mother had an event that was happening in her life, and so she sent me a letter and said she would really like it if Sydney and I could come to this event. And so we did. We flew over there, and we were able to attend her event with her. And the fact that she was getting a promotion was being celebrated. And so Sydney was 16 when we went to this promotion ceremony, and her birth mother was 16 when she got pregnant. And when Sydney connected the dots on those two events, we were going to visit her birth mother, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I'm 16 right now, and that's how old she was when she got pregnant with me." And all of those connections fell in place in Sydney's mind. You know how you can see the wheels turning?
Mm-hmm.
It was just like she got it. She understood why her birth mother chose adoption, and that, there's no way that as a 16-year-old Sydney felt ready to parent. And so it just suddenly all made sense to her. And that's because of the open adoption. It's because we had that connection that was
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Well, so now before you wrote the book, you also you felt so passionate about this that you started an organization called Unplanned Good. Would you like to
Mm-hmm.
talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and thank you so much. Unplanned Good, I started that organization in 2010. And part of the reason for that was that I just felt like it was on my heart to spread the word about open adoption and how beautiful it can be when the best interests of the child are kept at the center of it. And so Unplanned Good was an effort to talk about open adoption and to put it out there on the radar, because it seemed that people were choosing between abortion and parenting when they didn't want to parent. And so that seemed like an unfortunate choice to me, kind of a binary choice of just those two options. And why are we not putting this third one on the table? Why are we not talking more about adoption and letting these young women facing unplanned pregnancy know that they have another choice? And so I wanted to spread the word about that. And that's the point of the nonprofit. And so the website contains a lot of information about adoption, referrals, and then it also has a big section of testimonials from those three aspects of the adoption triad. Testimonials from birth parents and adoptive parents and adoptees.
And do you do events occasionally or conferences or something like that, or is it mainly just the website?
It is mainly the website, but it's also, I've done a few events, but more often it's being asked to speak at conferences. And I just got back from the Christian Alliance for Orphans, which is CAFO, which is a big annual conference. It was held in Atlanta last month. And so there are conference opportunities. I've also spoken at Heartbeat and a few others, because people, I think, are interested in this topic because they know so little about adoption these days, and because it's changed so much in the last few decades. So any opportunity to talk about open adoption and what it looks like these days is, I'm there. I'm there. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps you busy, right?
Yeah.
So,
But at the CAFO conference last month, is I had a panel of birth mothers that I was facilitating. And so what drew the audience in was being able to listen to them and to hear their perspective on why they chose adoption, and then now how they feel about it, being able to look back a decade on their adoption plan, what kind of a
mhm.
relationship they have with their child today. And so the birth mothers that spoke on the panel both talked about what led them to their decision and how they interact now with the adoptive parents as well as with their child.
Well,
So,
so how did you find these women to be on the panel?
well, I've found people who, it starts with people who want to tell their story. You would think that a woman might go through adoption, and we don't know how she might feel about it. Does she look back on it with, um is she proud of herself? Is she, wanting to stay quiet about her story or shout it from the rooftops? And it turns out that a lot of these birth mothers that I've come across want to shout it from the rooftops because they are proud of themselves for going through something really difficult. And there's no doubt that choosing adoption is certainly challenging. It's very difficult. There are parts of it that can be very painful because there's a loss that they're accepting in the adoption process. They're accepting the loss of that, direct parenting experience. Um, but these women also feel like they truly, truly did what was best for their child, to place that child into the care of a couple that's ready, willing, and able to parent. And they feel good about that, even though, it was really difficult. They put their child's best interests first, and there's some satisfaction that comes with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that what the book is? Is the book testimonies of birth moms like this, or?
There is one, the middle part, I'd say the middle section is testimonies of birth moms. Then the first part is, what led us there. The fact that the United States has the greatest ratio of unplanned pregnancies in the world. We also have the greatest rate of teen pregnancies in the world. And
Wow.
so those two facts, I think, are just kind of incredible. And then from there, you see, then what do we do with those pregnancies? We also have the highest rate of single mother homes. And we also have the highest abortion rate in the world. And so, starting with unplanned pregnancy, those are our two responses: either become a single mom or abort the child. And those two responses are so entrenched and so accepted and even kind of glamorized these days that, anyway, so that's what the first part of the book is about: is how did we get here to a choice between abortion and parenting, no matter if the birth mother is, 17, 16 years old. And then the middle part is those testimonials, and then at the end is a call to action. Now that we've changed adoption so much and we've discovered the beauty that can be in open adoption, what do we have to do to make that more common? Because it's less than 1% of the women facing unplanned pregnancy who choose adoption now. So less than 1%. That means
Wow.
it's like
Wow.
50-50 for abortion and parenting.
Well, do you have any idea what the numbers were like in 1965 or before Roe v. Wade?
The Well, so they were in the teens, but the teens and 20s even. But the thing is that they were often forced into it. So that's not even something that we would advocate today, because
Mm-hmm.
we shouldn't be forcing women into any of these paths. I think that we all are grown up enough and mature enough to search our heart and figure out what the right thing is to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you
One
remember
percent
those.
just seems so low. I mean, it's almost as though there's some sort of opposition to adoption to
There
make the
is
numbers that low.
there is some opposition to it there, and it's coming from a couple different places. I mean, one is there are women who remember how horrid those days of closed adoption were, and maybe they were personally hurt by adoption, by the adoption that they were forced into, or that they had lost their child that way. So there are women who've had those negative experiences with adoption back in the day, and they're still holding on to that grief and that sorrow from getting hurt by adoption back then. But then there's also just society that says, don't worry about it. You can, abortion is totally fine, and single parenting is pretty darn cool, as if it's a female empowerment thing. So there is some opposition to adoption.
Well, one of the things I like about the way you tell the story, we've noticed in our little corner of the internet that one of the things that's lacking in our world today that's causing a loss of meaning is this loss of community. That families are much smaller, they're often broken. The mobility in the country and people moving back and forth with jobs and so forth tears families apart to some extent, and
Mhm.
it's harder to get to know people because of the internet, and so often you have only online friends and no face-to-face friends. But when you talk about growing up in a big happy family and then you talk about the kinds of activities and events that an extended family could have with open adoption, and and it just makes it sound like it's contributing to this overall growth in community that we just need so desperately.
I think so. I think that's a good way to put it. The growth in community that we need so desperately. And it seems like it's kind of in some ways been replaced by this me first mentality, where I get to do whatever I want because it's all about me. And if if I remember the days when, all nine of us were under one roof, my five sisters and my brother and my parents, there was a lot of talk about what you had to do for the sake of the family. I mean, Saturday morning chores were about what's best for the family. And we went to church together. It was good for the family. And everything that we did in the home, it was because it was good for the family. And there was no opportunity or desire to talk about, well, what about me? We just didn't think that way because it just wasn't possible to have a successful household if you're only thinking about yourself. You have to think about your community first.
Well, do you think that affected you when you grew up and went out into your own life in adulthood? That do you think that affected the way you thought about things? That you were less apt to think about what about me, and you were more apt to think about what can I do for others?
Maybe subconsciously, my mom would be thrilled for us to have this conversation. Yeah. Yes. I think it does kind of lay a foundation, so that when somebody says, think of your child first, that totally makes sense. It's not something that you have to convince yourself about. Because you know as well as I do that that's what parenthood is. It's thinking about your child first and putting
Well,
your
that's the
child.
great discovery of parenthood, right? I mean,
Yes.
we used to say that when you get married, you find out how selfish you are because all of a sudden there's another person that you have to think about. But then
Uh-huh.
when you have a child, then you really find out how selfish you are, because there are no options when you have a child.
Uh-huh.
If you're going to be a decent human being at all, there's a
Right.
child. You have to take care of this child.
Yeah.
Feed them, they cry. You have to take care of them. You have to think about them. You have to imagine their future.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that just gets at that selfish part of us that's always screaming inside, but what about me? But what about me?
Yeah. What about me? That's not what
When
I
do
want
I get to go to the
to
bathroom without somebody knocking on the door?
Right. When do I get to take a 20-minute shower? I
Yeah.
don't know. But
uh,
that's because, yeah, I think it changes a person when you have kids and when you start thinking like that I want to do what's best for my child and I can wait, not a big deal. It's really not a big deal. It's not like a martyr situation.
yeah.
I can wait and do what's best for my child right now. And like, and now, I mean, I'm debating if I want to talk about this or not, but even when I go and date people now, it's like I only want to date men who have kids because the men who've never had kids, you just got to wonder they have a little bit of that selfish streak that the fathers don't have.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? Do
Oh,
you?
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure. But I mean, the other thing I was going to say, now Sydney just graduated from college, is that right?
she did last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now she's your friend,
Yes.
right? So it's not only that, yeah, there's no martyrdom in it at all because you're raising up this little person to become a hopefully a valuable member of society, but then also someone who will be your friend and
Hmm.
compatriot, and
Hmm.
and
Right.
not that that's all seamless or anything. I mean, there's a lot of lurches along the way,
Right.
but um, but but when things click and that moment happens, there's just nothing more beautiful in the world than to have this relationship with this person that wasn't there before, you know?
Right. Yeah, it really is beautiful. And then you have so many, firsts now that we have this new relationship post college. And
Hmm.
she just had her first, she got a job that she really loves now. She transitioned into a new field that she's very excited about. And she just had her first 90-day review. And she called to talk to me about it, like a corporate review. She got reviewed by her manager and setting goals for her development inside of the corporation. And it was just the best conversation to talk about, from now it was one corporate employee to another, being peers and professionals kind of. It was a fun conversation that she's talking about the kind of adult, contributor she is in her company. Like,
Uh-huh.
wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it
to be
is more of a
celebrated for
friend.
sure.
Yeah, it's more of a friendship now than it ever had been before, of course. Now that the bank of mom is closed, you know. It's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, because when you close the bank, then they have to have some other reason to want to spend time with you, and not just because you've got the
Right.
bank.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So she's a lot of fun these days, and it's nice the kinds of conversations we get to have. Yeah.
Well, so
Mhm.
you in talking about the book, you obviously have some hopes and dreams for this book. I mean, you wrote it because you had a goal of some kind.
Uh-huh.
What's the outcome that you're hoping will come from this?
What I would love to see happen is for more people to just realize that there are three options and that you can consider adoption if you're facing an unplanned pregnancy. It's so frequently just dismissed after not more than a nanosecond of consideration. It's just dismissed. And to have people really think about it in a practical way, like you can do this. People have done this, and people are glad that they've done this. They're grateful for the experience and for the relationships that come from it. But I was just sitting down to get really serious about this book maybe a year ago, when I had a conversation at the dining room table with Sydney and a friend of hers, and somehow I said I'm going to dig into this book on unplanned pregnancy and adoption, and her friend said, "Well, there's only two options." And I said, "Well, so tell me how you think about this." And he said, "There's only two options. You either abort or you parent." And it was, you lean forward and it's like, okay, Sydney is right here at this table with us. are you not are you not clear on the history here? Because he just wasn't even thinking about adoption as a possibility. And that's what I'd love to see change. I'd love to see people realize that it is a definite, practical, viable option.
Well, for that to happen though, people have to see the book. So so how do you get the book out there in front of people and get people to want to read it?
Well, so there's a whole, book marketing plan behind it. And I'm doing some podcasts and some interviews these days, and talking a bit about it. I have to rely on others, it's my village of friends that are going to get the word out there, because my own megaphone is relatively small. But having interviews, I was on Relevant Radio last week, and they have a nice big audience, the morning air show and the Drew Mariani show, two segments that covered it. And then next week, I'm going to be on Officer Tatum's show.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we'll talk
Wow.
about that. Yeah.
Now that's interesting. That's a connection I would never have made. How did you meet him someplace at some
No,
event?
I haven't met him yet. I haven't met him yet. Just sent him a note and said, would you like to talk about this? And hopefully, like you said, the title is intriguing. I'm hoping that does some of the heavy lifting for me as well. But we'll see. It's just those are the kinds of opportunities that get it out to more people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
And then
so
I'm
speaking
connecting
of a
with
title, did you purposely title it in a way that would be a little bit um what's the word? A little bit confusing for people when you said pro-choice, pro-adoption.
uh-huh,
Um, in my mind, what you're saying is that the choice is the adoption, that the adoption is the choice, right?
uh-huh.
Because the minute you say pro-choice, that sets up another whole paradigm of argument between pro-life and pro-choice. But when you use pro-choice, you're using it in a different frame.
Yeah.
So that altering that frame makes it surprising and intriguing, and hopefully that would make people stop for a second and look.
There it is. Yeah, that is very much the thinking. Exactly. It's that adoption is a choice. Um, and then part of that too is that if you call yourself pro-choice, if you really believe that you're pro-choice, then adoption needs to be one of the choices. How can you say that you're pro-choice if you're not considering adoption one of the choices? I mean, I realize that it usually refers to being pro-abortion, but
Mm-hmm.
now that the group has called it pro-choice, then let's really talk about our choices.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but the other thing too is that the aspect is this isn't written from a religious standpoint. It's not about, God or commandments or God's laws, or it's not about religion at all. It's more from a practical standpoint of, there are some drawbacks to both abortion and single parenting. There are some negative consequences that come from both of those choices, from both of those options. And so I wanted to make those a little bit clearer because they tend to get kind of swept under the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at what abortion really does to women, I mean, there are studies that document how in three areas, basically, there's a significance of the link between abortion and breast cancer. There's a link between abortion and future preterm births, and then there's links between abortion and mental health issues. And so all of that documentation seems to get swept under the carpet. And the whole idea of informed consent before a procedure is just for some reason not being heeded in this area. And so getting that information out there, and then single parenting, it just seems like is being so glamorized when you think about, Angelina Jolie and Sandra Bullock and all these different famous women who have buckets of money and 3 nanny shifts a day. It's like, yeah, of course they can single parent. They're already quite wealthy and have 3 nannies covering the nursery. So that's a whole different situation though if you're, dropping out of a junior college to become a mom
Mm-hmm.
or never got your career established, then it's a whole different set of challenges. So
Well, yeah, I mean, single parenting is a very heroic endeavor, but I don't think it's glamorous.
yeah, I don't think it's glamorous and I don't think it's easy,
Yeah.
but I could agree that it is a heroic endeavor. But I think that we just want to be more honest, I believe, about both of those other options.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are, then suddenly adoption gets elevated and can be on the same, range of choices as the other two. So that's what I'm really hoping for, that we could start seeing adoption in that light, where if you choose to place your baby for adoption, there's a lot of choices. The women who are choosing adoption are quite empowered to make it what they want it to be. They can choose an open adoption and they can even choose the parents, and they can decide, do you want a 45-year-old couple who's established, or do you want a 30-year-old couple that's starting out? Do you want a stay-at-home mom or a two-career couple? Do you want, what religion, what race, what age, what income bracket? You can choose all of that as a birth mother. And a lot of people don't realize that either.
So I'm assuming that there are adoption organizations that are offering these choices somehow. That in the book you probably talk about the organizations.
A little bit. I mean, there are a lot of adoption agencies in pretty much every metro area, where people might live. Um, and if you say that you want an open adoption, that usually means that you get to look through all these different profiles, and if you want to look through a dozen profiles and decide, you could do that. If you want to look through 200 profiles and decide, you could do that. But you can pretty much meet the characteristics that you have in mind, or figure out what your criteria are for the parents you're going to choose.
That's really kind of amazing. I mean, I suppose it's not surprising given the technology that's available nowadays, but
Uh-huh. Yeah. But it's beautiful that that privilege, that power is put back into the hands of the birth mother. And so
mm,
she's the one who's placing her baby very intentionally with a couple that she thinks are going to be just the right kind of parents for that baby.
mm,
And so when she does that, she has certain criteria in her mind. And so the agency, their role is mostly to just bring it forward and get her to articulate it and see what she wants.
mm.
And then whatever she wants, there are so many people waiting to adopt a baby that you can pretty much find the kind of couple that you're looking for.
Well, so you said 1% of pregnancies today end in adoption,
The
but
1% of the unplanned pregnancies.
1% of the unplanned pregnancies end in
Mhm.
adoption. And
Right.
but there must be a lot more parents looking for babies than that 1%, right?
Yes, there's quite the wait, quite the they're
Do you have
about,
any
they
idea what the
say,
ratio is? Is it like three sets of parents waiting for every baby, or
36 or so is the current
30,
estimation.
36?
36 couples for everybody. There's about 2 million couples waiting at any point in the United States.
36 couples are waiting for every baby.
Yes, and about 2 million at any point in time. 2
Wow. So
million
there would
couples.
never be any worry at all that there would be somebody who wants this baby and would take care of this baby and love and cherish this baby.
Not at all. Not at all. There are so many beautiful couples who are ready, willing, and able to parent. They've thought about it, they've worked towards it, they have it on their hearts, many of them have even set up nurseries, just thinking they need to visualize it in order for it to happen. There are so many people waiting and hoping and praying to adopt. Yeah, that's not a danger. That's why the birth mother gets to make her choices,
Mm-hmm.
and she gets to say, our birth mother had criteria. She said that she wanted to find a couple who would raise her baby Christian somehow, and she wanted to find a couple that would provide her baby with lots of cousins. And so that didn't have kids yet, but would provide lots of cousins. So given that my brothers and sisters did their job, and there were 14 of them by the time Sydney was born,
Uh-huh.
she entered the world with 14 cousins, and that was exactly what her birth mother wanted. She valued family.
And so, has your extended family been very close, even through all the growing up years and everything, where Sydney's been able to play with all the cousins and
Oh yeah, definitely. I just got off the phone this morning. My brother's going to host Thanksgiving, and he's trying to figure out how they're going to fit, 28 people in his house. But he wanted to make sure that all the cousins were knew that they were invited. A couple of them are on the East Coast, but he still wanted to make sure that every single cousin knew that they were welcome to come to Thanksgiving dinner. So he's, taking great efforts to get his email out to all the cousins.
wow,
So
that is so great.
it's
It's a
beautiful.
rarity in today's world, really it is.
It is.
Yeah,
It is. Yeah.
yeah. Well, this has been just a delight, Terry.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for your book, and it's publishing in November.
Mid-November, because next month is November is National Adoption Month.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know about that either, but it's National Adoption Month. And then the 19th, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, is National Adoption Day, where a lot of courts open up to finalize adoptions. And so I definitely want to get it out in the month of National Adoption Month.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be out there on Amazon sometime before the end of the month, hopefully closer to National Adoption Day.
Okay. Well, when you do get a link for it, I mean, I'm going to publish this probably early November, maybe the second week of November, something like that. So when you get a link for the book, when it publishes, let me know and I'll add it to the description of the video.
I will do that, Karen. Sounds
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it's been a delight talking with you about this. I'm really excited about your book, and now you have two books in the can. What's your next book?
I do know already what my third one's going to be
Really?
about.
Wow. Okay.
It's going to be about birth parent support and how we do a better job of that in this country. Because
Okay.
women who place their babies for adoption, there's a lot of beneficial and healthy things we can do to help them with the next couple steps right after placement. So that's what I want to write about.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's
Thank
terrific.
you. Thank you.
That's definitely one of the needs that we have. So
Yeah.
go for it,
It's
girl.
been fun. Thank you, Karen. It's been a
Yeah.
blast chatting with
Yeah.
you.
Give my best to Sydney, and
I will. I will. Thank you so much.
we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Bye
Bye.
bye.